And good evening. This is Mottek on Money. We're doing it live here in the 5 o'clock hour, prime time in Los Angeles. Mottek on Money 5 nights a week for you, live on the air here in 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And yes, the on-demand Mottek on Money podcast for you at kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. And on the socials, too, at Frank Mottek on X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. The month of August in the Wall Street history books now with a mostly lower finish today and a loss for the month. Stocks did move lower today to end August on a sour note. This after the latest reading on the inflation front from the Federal Reserve's preferred inflation gauge proved pretty much in line with what analysts were expecting for July. The next big thing that's going to happen is tomorrow when we get the August jobs report. First thing tomorrow morning, that's the big enchilada of monthly economic reports, which the Fed also pays attention to, of course. The Dow coming in for a closing loss today of 168 points. The S&P 500 down 7, and the Nasdaq slipped 16 points. The cost of goods and services rose 0.2% in July. That was in line with the expectations here by analysts of the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index. And that is, we're told, the Fed's preferred gauge of inflation. The core reading of that index, which strips out food and energy prices, also often described as the Fed's favorite inflation measure, was also in line with expectations, showing a 0.2% monthly rise, while the year-over-year rate ticked up to 4.2% from 4.1%. Yep, inflation moving higher, not lower. We're going to talk about that in just a moment with Ken Winans, money manager and president of Winans Investments. The hot labor summer, meanwhile, is heating up in the face of all this inflation, with the writers and actors strike continuing, shutting down Hollywood productions. Now American Airlines flight attendants say they're ready to go on strike, but would prefer a deal after years of unsuccessful contract talks. Meanwhile, UPS is offering early retirements now to some pilots as UPS deals with a weak air freight market. Yep, you heard me, and rising labor costs. I'll talk about the labor issues out there with labor attorney Thomas Lenz with the Atkinson Andelson Law Firm in Pasadena, past chair of the Labor and Employment Section for the State Bar of California, and lecturer in law teaching at the USC Gould School of Law. And a lot to talk about tonight involving China, including a report that half of major lithium deals since 2018 were made by Chinese companies as the rise of electric vehicles continues and more reliance on China as a result. U.S.-China trade, meanwhile, is down big between the U.S. and China. Meanwhile, the U.S. and China locking horns again over a new Chinese map covering about 90% of the South China Sea, where trillions of dollars in trade flows every year. And another new map showed Russian territory as part of China. We'll get the latest on all that tonight with China expert Gordon Chang, author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War, and on Twitter, or now X, at Gordon G. Chang. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, inflation, AI, crypto, too, the whole works tonight. Joining us live now, money manager Ken Winans, president of Winans Investments, Forbes magazine contributor, market historian, and author of Investment Atlas 1 and 2. Rough month of August here, Ken. Let me take a look here. The Dow, S&P 500, and Nasdaq each booking a fourth straight winning session yesterday, but pulling back today and ending the month of August lower pretty much across the board here. Looks like the Nasdaq down about 2.2% for the month, the S&P 500 down just about 2% for the month, and the Dow down about 2.5% for the month. Give us your assessment here of where things stand.
Frank, you have to also extend and look at other indices, and I'm talking about the S&P 400 mid-cap, the Russell 2000 small cap, the NYSE composite, and when you broaden out your search and you try to, just basically ascertain what's really going on with the markets, this is at best a mixed bag. Most of those other indices are in single-digit territory, most of it mid to low single-digit. In the annals of history, I don't think 2023 is going to go down as a great year for all investors across the board. And then on top of all of it, you have bond prices pulling back, most notably when I look at the Dow Jones Corporate Bond Average. So with everything you rattled off before this interview, this is hardly a growing, rambunctious economy. When you're talking about strikes and inflation stubbornly high, and then you're looking at the possibility that there will be some bad news going into the fall. And sadly, we're going to start getting all the political rhetoric for the election next year. So people are going to have to really keep their wits about them and be smart about how they navigate going into the fall. And I would just say that, almost like that great old Clint Eastwood movie, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I think that pretty well sums up this year. And it's time for people to pick up the pieces and try to figure out what to do. One other quick point before we jump to the next question. I'm finding there's a lot of people that either were getting greedy again and they were hanging on to some tech stocks too long, or there were people who were a little too conservative and now they're trying to buy things near their high. Again, they're walking off their strategies, and that will always get you into trouble.
On there live with money manager Ken Winans. And speaking of the good, the bad, and the ugly, just driving around Southern California, that's what you see, especially from an economic standpoint. I was with some people from out of town here, and they were commenting, looking at all the tents on the streets and all that in Hollywood. They're saying, what's going on here? Unemployment is at zero, they thought. And, what's going on here?
Yeah,
just look around.
Zero. Well, here's another thing, too. And if I was younger and I really wanted to spend time writing on the annals of COVID and the post-COVID world, I would. Here's the thing about statistics. As somebody who's been using them all my career, I think a lot of the statistical gauges are still off. Data collecting during COVID was at best problematic. And so we're making these comparisons to a couple of years back. And I hate to say, Frank, it was faulty data just to begin with. So I think there has to be a little bit of cautionary tone to anything you hear coming from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics out of Washington, or quite frankly, any of the state capitals. Yep. I just don't think the numbers are all that accurate. I really don't.
Right. So we got that number today, which we're told is the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, ticking higher, by the way. And tomorrow, the big jobs report for the month of August. Are you expecting any surprises tomorrow? And what kind of reaction might we see?
I think we're going to find that there's going to be a softening, mainly because there's basically a temporary hiring period during the summertime for, basically resort type communities and things like that. But as we wind down the summer, going into the fall, I think a lot of things are going to readjust. Frank, there's another issue too, and I think it's just worth bringing up, that we have, when you're talking about inflation for the country, you have to start looking at it regionally. I just ran real estate data today for my real estate index, and it is all over the map. Now, admittedly, the hurricane goofed up some things when we started trying to look at data, what happened in the South. But my point being that this is such a lopsided yin and yang kind of economy right now that it's very hard to really look at a national average and say that everything is fine or everything is bad. I mean, a good case in point. As you very well know, I'm spending a lot more time in Las Vegas, and Vegas restaurants are doing very well. Vegas decided to go off COVID restrictions faster than California. Therefore, a lot of the businesses are further ahead. They're basically, their government is very pro-business, very much wants more restaurants opening up, wants things to work well. So again, just because you say the West, you need to break up not only state by state, but region by region within a state. And it's hard to do unless you really are willing to dig into the data.
And here we are. I don't know if you saw the latest reports. The headlines, COVID-19 making a comeback here in California, and already they're recommending masks again in certain situations. And looks like we're going to have to keep an eye on this. And obviously this is going to be impacting business here again. Well,
and then I would add on that, they're looking at COVID-19, but reports that I'm hearing, especially now, I spend a lot of time up in Northern California near the wine country, but the reports coming out of San Francisco and Oakland are not good when you start talking about other diseases that we thought we were done with that are making a comeback in a lot of these communities because of sanitation concerns. It's almost like we've gone back into the mid-ages when you start thinking about these kind of issues. And I just don't see an adequate government response to dealing with it. When I talk to local politicians, they're overwhelmed, Frank. They don't know what to do. They honestly have no idea what to do.
Right. I remember Mayor Garcetti at the time kind of laughed off reports that even the plague was showing up in some areas. It's unbelievable what's been happening in the areas where the homeless are encamped and so forth.
Well, here's the other problem. And I'm by no means an expert on this area, but when I start hearing the phrase drug-resistant diseases, when they're talking about tuberculosis, they're talking about diphtheria, typhoid, it really makes me nervous. It's literally like I'm reading a history book. But with that being said, when you are a restaurant owner trying to operate a restaurant, and certainly in downtown Los Angeles, they are the unsung heroes of what came out of COVID. They are very clever people. They're trying to figure it out. But Frank, I'm hearing this constantly. I talk people who are retiring who are in California. They're looking, can they retire in the greater Los Angeles metro area or the Bay Area? And we're saying no. If you want to stay in California, you need to go into the Valley. And they look at the Valley and they say, well, wait a minute, it's hot there. I might as well just go to Vegas if I'm going to have to live in a hot climate anyway and move out. So I think, again, a lot of retirees are seriously, even though they wouldn't have even thought about this 5 years ago, they're looking at other states seriously. And the fact that our politicians in Sacramento and certainly the various city governments aren't remotely thinking about their seniors is going to really bite them hard.
On your live with money manager Ken Winans. And Ken, what about NVIDIA recently kissing a new high? And you saw that big AI rally this year. What about the latest buzz on AI and those big names?
Well, it's funny. It's going to be we'll have an interview while I'm back at the Schwab Impact Conference in Philadelphia in October, because AI is a big part of what financial services is talking about now. But here's my problem. And I mean, I've been a statistician and a quant analyst most of my career. And when I talk to all the people about this newfound religion in AI, when it comes to stock picking, the thing that I asked them is, said, okay, well, look, I was around in the era when Watson, the IBM super machine, was trying to make inroads into Wall Street. And I asked the programmers then the same question I'm asking now. What are your default assumptions on raising cash in bear markets? And what I hear from these programmers at Google and other places is, well, no, you just rotate. You simply reallocate your portfolio, and those AI computers are taught to do that. Again, it's the default assumptions in AI. So although AI is very popular to talk about right now, and many companies are looking at it as a way to reduce costs in the back office, I'm just saying that I do not think it's manna from heaven, that it's going to take time to have this develop more fully in our economy.
All right, we see Bitcoin back below 26K here. Ken, what about the cryptos? I don't think you have the laser eyes on, but I know you follow what's going on here. What about Bitcoin and the crypto names here?
Well, let me tell you, I think as somebody who is a novice in crypto, again, I'm an expert commodity trader, but I'm a novice in crypto. What I have determined is that the best way to follow the trends in crypto is to follow the trends in the NASDAQ. They seem to track very, very close to each other. And so I think the fact that the NASDAQ stocks are backing off is what's happening with crypto. But there are strong, strong headwinds coming out of Washington. I try to go every year with a group, from Las Vegas to Washington, D.C., and the regulation of crypto is very hot on everybody's mind. They have not forgotten what happened last year in the crypto world, or certainly the embezzlement, the things that just went wrong in an unregulated situation. There will be regulation for crypto. It is coming down the pipe. Granted, during the election, it might actually accelerate because of the hits that a lot of people took last year. But simply put, Frank, I think that crypto is going to continue to be, in my opinion, a Wild West show. And it's going to move back and forth with the tech stocks and certainly with any news out of Washington or even the state capitals.
All right, it should be noted the month of August saw those various downgrades, which raised a lot of eyebrows, actually. Downgrade of Uncle Sam's credit rating, the mortgage giants Fannie and Freddie, and some banks got downgraded, and with more possible big names on a future list. What about all of that and what we saw here this month, and what about where things are going at this point?
Well, there's another thing, too, that we saw happen during the summertime is an old phrase back that we heard back in the 70s, which was strategic bankruptcies. And the one that comes to my mind is certainly one that I followed very closely, Diebold, which was the company that made the voting machines that we remember the hanging Chad problems back in the 2000 election. But this was an old line company that had been around since the 1850s that felt that they made a very bad decision, a very horrible merger with a company out of Germany called Nixdorf, and they did it using a lot of debt. Well, it did not work out, so they said, well, why don't we just file bankruptcy? And by the way, I'm paraphrasing what happened. I'm not an attorney. But they elected bankruptcy to shed themselves of that bad debt and come out with it as a new company. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. We just had Rite Aid go into Chapter 11, their drugstore chain. I think there's going to be a lot more of that as companies try to figure out how do we get rid of this massive debt. And I dare say that public agencies, mainly local municipalities, might also begin to think about how do we shed ourselves of this massive debt that we basically put ourselves into over the last 30 years. So a lot of reorganization, a lot of reformulation of things is yet to come. And I think it's going to be almost like the 1994 bankruptcy of Orange County. I think we're going to see those headlines a lot going through 2024.
Right. We're already seeing Rite Aid closing some pharmacies in a national restructuring, reportedly preparing bankruptcy filings while facing opioid lawsuits and, of course, big losses and the shoplifting epidemic that's going on as well. So we are keeping an eye on that one. At this point, Ken Winans, any specific places where you are putting money now and or taking it off the table as we start the month of September?
Well, one thing that I'm doing for sure, any company that just simply has not been keeping up with the way things have been going, if it's not rallying now, I don't think it's going to rally if we have volatility in the fall. So we've been shedding those. I'm actually going, Frank, we've talked about it before, but I'm really taking a hard look at some of these entertainment names that at some point the strike will end. I mean, I know that it's very contentious, and this is a money show, so I'm just going to talk about making money, not taking a side one way or the other. But today, literally, we were buying Icon Enterprises bonds. You got a bond that's coming due in 2.5 to 3 years. I think it is yielding something close to 9.5%. Icon Enterprises has been in the Hollywood game a very long time with some very smart players, and I think that's a no-brainer. The other one that I like is Paramount Global's preferred shares. It's PARAB. I think it's right now yielding 13.5%. Again, I don't think Paramount's going to go anywhere either. So again, I'm looking at some of these names that people could take advantage of. Look, I mean, I know for some people they might morally have problems with this, like you're taking a side in the strike. Again, this is a money show. We're supposed to look at ways to make money, and I think you're going to see that. You talked about what happened with UPS. We're talking about airlines. One of the other quick things that I'll bring up, I'm flying to Las Vegas next week, and I am shocked at what a 1-hour plane flight is going to cost me from the Bay Area to Las Vegas. Those are all costs being added to the consumer for a simple short flight. We better get used to that. That is going to continue on, whether it's hotels, airlines, rental cars. The business passes on the cost to consumers, and that is going to be what we're going to be dealing with going forward.
Ken Winans, thank you very much for taking the call tonight. That's Money Manager Ken Winans, president of Winans Investments, Forbes magazine contributor, and market historian, author of Investment Atlas 1 and 2. Have a great evening, Ken, and thank you very much for taking the call here tonight.
My pleasure, Frank. Take care.
Thanks very much, and we'll check where the action was on Wall Street in just a moment. But first, the latest on your ride now. You're on 790 KBC. Friends, I'm not exaggerating when I say this. QC Kinetics can change your life. You can live again without that chronic joint pain and without drugs or surgery. Frank Mottek here. QC Kinetics is advanced regenerative medicine. They take your body's own concentrated healing properties and put them right into your joint to restore and repair that damaged tissue that's causing all of the pain. The patient satisfaction reports are absolutely astonishing. Finally, a real alternative to the old ways of dealing with pain. And unlike surgery, there is no downtime with QC treatments. If you have constant pain in your knees, hips, shoulders, or back, you need to call and get a free consultation from the medical professionals at QC Kinetics today. Imagine this autumn moving around pain-free, doing things you love again, walking, hiking, playing with your grandkids, you name it. Call QC Kinetics and see how the latest advances in precision regenerative medicine can attack your pain and bring you lasting relief. QC Kinetics, locations in Glendale, the city of Orange, Mission Viejo, and now also in Costa Mesa. Call 213-997-PAIN, 213-997-PAIN. Again, that's 213-997-PAIN. Mottek on Money continues here on 790 KBC. Mixed finish to the day on Wall Street, down for the month of August. Now in the Wall Street history books, the Dow coming in for a closing loss of 168 today to 34,722. The S&P 500 down 7 at 4508. The Nasdaq managed a closing gain of 16 points at 14,035. The yield in the 10-year note now down to 4.11%. That's been running hot lately, sending mortgage rates to 20-year plus highs. Taking a look at the cryptos here, we see a Bitcoin down about $20 at 25,970. Ethereum down about $1 now at 1,646, and Doge at 6 cents. The price of oil up around $83.60 a barrel, down about 3 cents here at the moment. The damage has been done at Southern California gas pumps. Regular now averaging $5.37 a gallon, ticking higher again overnight. Now 11 cents a gallon higher than where it was a year ago. Heading into the Labor Day holiday weekend, $5.71 is now the average price for premium. Diesel way up there now at $5.98 a gallon. That is 57 cents a gallon higher than a month ago, but actually about 30-some-odd cents below where it was a year ago. Taking a look at what's happening with some of the names making news today, Salesforce shares down actually higher today by 3%, nearly 3% higher. And that was the leader of the Dow movers today after the company delivered a strong outlook and improved margins 2 weeks ahead of the customer relations management software giant's annual Dreamforce conference coming up in the Bay Area. Shares of Atka up 13.5% after that ID management software company hiked its annual earnings outlook after a worst-case scenario of weak business spending never materialized. Shares of AMC Entertainment Holdings, one of the meme stocks, AMC Theaters, moving lower by about 1.5%, despite the announcement that a Taylor Swift movie is coming to theaters in October. Shares of other theater chain operators, including Cinemark Holdings and IMAX, finished higher. We did get that reading on inflation today from the Fed's favorite inflation indicator, and that came a little bit hotter. That came pretty much in line with expectations, but it did tick higher. Tomorrow we'll be getting the August jobs report, and that'll be coming out first thing tomorrow morning, an hour ahead of the opening bell, with economists expecting job gains to slow to 170,000 in August from 187K in the previous month. An actual number below the estimate has the potential to tilt arguments in favor of a economic soft landing, according to MarketWatch, to further lower the market-implied chances of another Fed rate hike this year and to revive a recent streak of gains in the Dow and the S&P 500, which ended this week. Now the latest news for you right here on 790 KBC. Innovation Refunds has been helping small businesses that qualify get a business payroll tax refund through the Employee Retention Credit, known as the ERC. It's Frank Mottek here. The ERC is a tax refund for businesses that kept employees on payroll for parts of the year 2020 and 2021. Now, if you own a business with more than 5 employees, you could have money waiting for you. The ERC tax filing is very complex. Innovation Refunds is dedicated to helping business owners navigate the process. If your business faced challenges during the pandemic that it wouldn't have without pandemic government orders, you may be eligible for a substantial refund. Go to innovationrefunds.com to see if you qualify. Innovation Refunds has hundreds of 5-star reviews on Trustpilot, Google, and they're accredited by the BBB. There's no upfront fee. They don't get paid unless you get paid. InnovationRefunds.com or call make that 1-843-REFUNDS. That's 1-843-REFUNDS, REFUNDS. Innovation Refunds does not provide tax or legal advice. They work with an independent network of tax professionals and will share information with them to evaluate and process your claims. Terms and conditions apply. Mottek on Money continues here in 790 KBC. Good evening. The hot labor summer heating up more with the writers and actors strike continuing, shutting down Hollywood productions. Looks like the writers strike just about 4 months now, and the actors on strike approaching 2 months. Now, American Airlines flight attendants say they're ready to go on strike, would prefer a deal after years of unsuccessful contract talks. Meanwhile, UPS now offering early retirement to some of its pilots as UPS deals with a weak air freight market and rising labor costs. Let's talk about all this right now with labor law attorney Thomas Lenz, based here in Southern California with the Atkinson Andelson Law Firm in Pasadena, past chair of the Labor and Employment Section for the State Bar of California and lecturer in law teaching at the USC Gould School of Law. Thomas Lenz, thank you very much for taking the call. I know you've been very busy these days given what's happening. Give us your assessment of this hot labor summer and how things have developed here so far.
Well, thanks so much, Frank, for the opportunity to comment today. Yes, it's definitely a busy summer, and it seems like one labor situation is inspiring the other. I've never seen so many strikes in my career. It really seems like Southern California is the epicenter for all of this activity. I was actually checking a strike tracker that Cornell University has online, and we just have lots going on. People's expectations are very high, as well as their frustrations. And I think as long as positions remain entrenched and people are not willing to perhaps listen to each other or continue dialogue, these situations will unfortunately persist and affect our economy. I see, for example, the hotel workers saying that they're going to be making a lot of noise and leaving dirty hotel rooms to try to discourage people from coming to LA. And you have to wonder whether that's going to scare people away, not only now, but for the future. So it's, I think some big issues, but it's, hopefully something where cooler heads will eventually prevail.
The hotel workers, certainly they've been rolling their labor protest at the various hotels in the area, and I see some hotels have already put fences up and so forth. So any resolution in sight there?
Not that I can see. And with so many of these labor negotiations, when the parties are talking outside the room, they're not usually getting a whole lot of progress made. They're playing to the public. They're hoping to generate attention for their situation. It's when we really don't hear things that they're most likely going to be at the table and talking seriously about how to bridge the gap between the two sides.
And with Hollywood shut down now, this ongoing writer's strike and the actor's strike, and any signs of either side saying uncle at this point?
That I am seeing, no. It seems to be more of the same, and the parties seem to be in this for the long haul, and it's unfortunate because it's something that will affect a lot of people, not just the talent, but that's out there performing, but it could be the people behind the scenes that that put the shows together and that make things happen. And so it's writers, it's actors, it's a lot of different people, and so it affects people at a lot of different layers in the Southern California economy. And so the sooner that people can talk productively and really listen to each other and make some progress, I think that'll be when we really start to see some light at the end of the tunnel.
A lot of people are wondering how long can it go? At what point can something happen where people just decide they have to get back to work, or is there any kind of deadline here to resolve this, or legally is there at some point when the companies say, okay, well, we don't have a deal, we're going to do something else?
It's all about leverage, unfortunately. So there are no deadlines that exist under law to resolve negotiations or strikes. So I think oftentimes each side will see how long they can hold out to put pressure on the other. And that's about the best we have under the current legal system. And it doesn't necessarily promote confidence that anything will be addressed or resolved effectively soon. So it could be days, it could be months. And for people who are relying on this employment for paychecks, I mean, they've got bills to pay, and if they can't pay those bills, perhaps they need to look at alternatives. Whether that's here or somewhere else, whether that's some other type of work. And I'm not saying they should do that, but it's a fact of needing to pay those bills, feed a family, whatever that happens to be. And I think for employers, if it's a change in the scope and direction of business, if they plan on using, for example, AI to replace the work that individuals do, that is something that, needs to be addressed in a meaningful way for both sides so that people can move on. The law does not require either side to agree in labor negotiations. However, good faith is required, and that is demonstrated by the actions as well as really the timing in which people act. If you sit back on your haunches and aren't doing anything, or you're doing things that are predictably unacceptable to the other, those are signs of bad faith, and that could be illegal, in which case legal charges, unfair labor practice charges at the National Labor Relations Board might be a recourse.
And now American Airlines flight attendants speaking out, they're ready to go on strike. They say they would prefer a deal. It looks like they've been involved in years of contract talks with their company, so behind the scenes, but looks like they're ready to go public and may also go on strike at some point.
Yeah, that is something that would, of course, have national impact, certainly not just a Southern California thing. Air as well as rail employees are covered by a different labor law, the Railway Labor Act, so it does have some different requirements, but at the end of the day, yeah, a strike is possible, and you never know whether, what impact that will have, on other employers in the industry. So I'm sure that everybody in the transportation industry is watching what happens with American Airlines. Certainly, people who travel on American Airlines should, be, I think, paying close attention to this to see whether it affects them.
Certainly. Your phone's probably ringing off the hook there. We appreciate your time. Attorney Thomas Lenz with the Atkinson Andelson Law Firm in Pasadena, past chair of the Labor and Employment Section for the State Bar of California, and lecturer in law, teaching at the USC Gould School of Law. Thank you very much for joining us live here tonight.
My pleasure, Frank. Take care.
Thank you very much, and we'll talk China in just a moment. But first, the latest on your ride now here on 790 KBC. Folks looking for legal help you can trust? Look no further than attorney Clark Fielding and the Fielding Law Team, your go-to destination for top-notch personal injury legal representation. Fielding Law understands life can take unexpected turns, and you need a strong legal team to stand by your side. Now, if you've been hurt in an accident that was not your fault and need help with a personal injury claim to obtain justice, Fielding Law is here to fight for you. Accidents happen, but you don't have to face the aftermath alone. Fielding Law experienced attorneys are here to guide you through the legal process and ensure you get the compensation you deserve. Medical bills piling up? Lost wages due to injury? Don't worry. Fielding Law specializes in personal injury cases and works tirelessly to recover your losses so you can focus on healing. The Fielding Law Team has a proven record of success. They've helped countless clients secure fair settlements and win in court. You can trust Fielding Law to provide you with the best legal representation possible. If Fielding Law takes your case, Clark Fielding and his team of sharks will personally work with you, fighting hard for you to receive the compensation the law allows. Call Fielding Law for a free case evaluation. It costs you nothing to get the honest opinion. And do what I did. Put Clark Fielding's number in your phone under the word accident. Hit it when you need it, 833-88-SHARK, 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. Mottek on Money continues here on 790 KBC. A lot to talk about involving China tonight, including a new report that says half of major lithium deals since 2018 were made by Chinese companies as the rise of electric vehicles continues around the world and more reliance on China as a result. Turns out U.S.-China trade is down big this year. Meanwhile, the U.S. and China still locking horns over a variety of issues, including a new Chinese map covering about 90% of the South China Sea, where trillions of dollars in trade flows every year. And another new map shows Russian territory as part of China. Let's get the latest now with China expert Gordon Chang, author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War, and on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon Chang, thank you very much for taking the call here. First of all, on this trade story here, U.S.-China trade is down big. A lot of concerns about the Chinese economy at the moment. Give us your assessment of what's happening.
I think the most important thing is that the United States and its companies are starting to realize that they cannot rely on China. It's not only a question of Chinese aggression roiling the world, it's also policies in China that target foreign businesses. And so this will continue. The trade drop this year is pretty significant for the first 6 months. We're talking about 20% down in terms of volume. I think it's going to be even more later on as companies realize that China is no longer a place that they can do business.
And now the Chinese real estate sector in focus. Remember, during our great recession, we were looking at China, and oh boy, they're doing so great there with their real estate and building all these places. And and ghost cities and so forth. It now looks like the situation has reversed. What about what's happening with the Chinese economy and the focus on real estate there?
Well, China's having its 2008, and we certainly saw this in August, where real estate sales of the major companies were down 34% year on year. And that really means that the sector has collapsed. And that's important because property accounts for somewhere between 25 and 30% of gross domestic product. So what's happening is that there's just too much debt. People are not happy. They can see prices are coming down. They're not buying. The big property companies are on the edge of bankruptcy, and some of them are actually in bankruptcy. So really what we're talking about is 2008 comes to China. A little bit late, but nonetheless, it's coming to China.
Right, and certainly the words financial crisis in China, that really rings alarm bells there, right? I mean, what are the Chinese people being told about this crisis there?
Well, they're being, they certainly aren't being told it's a crisis. The government produces statistics. Some of those headline statistics just do not correspond with underlying indicators and what we can see. And the Chinese people know there's a problem, and that's one of the reasons why we have this unprecedented surge of middle-class Chinese who have given up on their country and have risked everything, including their lives, to walk into the United States. That's a real indication that people don't have to be told how bad things are to understand that there's really very little hope left in China.
All right, what about these maps causing controversy now? This new map that they put out on the South China Sea causing anger and obviously causing the U.S. also to react to this.
Yes, well, Malaysia and the Philippines are not happy with China's new map, as, of course, Russia is, and Taiwan. But the point here is that this map, in the case of Russia, violates an agreement that they came to in 2008, which just tells us that agreements with China are absolutely worthless. And right now, I don't think that the United States and others should be trying to come to agreements with China because we know they violate them. And we can see this in some very clear cases with this map. And at the end of the day, I think that we're going to see countries in the region band together because they realize that there's nothing that they can do about coming to terms with China, and the only thing they can do is deter it.
You saw that Newsweek report signaling that there might be some there's speculation now that the relationship between the Russian President Putin and the Chinese president might have become strained based on another map that's come out showing Russian territory as part of China.
Yes, a half of an island that was part of that 2008 agreement. I am very skeptical of stories that say that Russia and China are not on good terms because Xi Jinping realizes that he needs to support Russia because Russia is destabilizing the world, and that Xi Jinping believes is in his interest. And so we see China continuing to support Russia's war effort in Ukraine. We do not see China cutting Russia off. And until it does, there might be tensions in the relationship, but they are not significant.
And in this push here, especially in California, to get more electric vehicles on the road, looks like we're helping China. On that report, half of major lithium deals since 2018, for example, were made by Chinese companies. What do we need to know about that?
Well, China clearly has a determined plan to corner the markets on rare earths and lithium. And I think that they will be successful in buying up a lot. The problem for them is that they've got to sell, which means that even though they may own a lot of the production, they certainly are going to be in a position where they do have to offload this to keep their mines going. But we got to be concerned because, just the most recent news about troubles in North Africa where Gabon has a coup, that's a big lithium producer. Afghanistan, big lithium deposits. So, China is doing very well in that regard.
All right. Anything else top of mind? Obviously, Taiwan is still an issue. And what's the latest on what's happening there?
There have been, again, a lot of big provocations in these flights around Taiwan. Also, naval Chinese boats getting very close to Taiwan waters. But, right now the big story is what's happening inside Taiwan, because they have a presidential election on January 13th of next year. And there's been a new candidate, Terry Gao, the owner of Foxconn, the big Apple subcontractor. And now there are three, I guess you can call them pro-China candidates, and they are all badly lagging Vice President William Lai of the governing Democratic Progressive Party, who now has basically a 20-point lead on his closest competitor. And that means that until the pro-China candidates can come together, then this is going to be a laugher of an election for the Democratic Progressive Party. I tend to think that the pro-China candidates will get together because Beijing will force them to.
We'll continue to follow all these developments with you closely. China expert Gordon Chang, the author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War, and on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon Chang, thank you very much for joining us live here tonight.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you very much, and have a great evening. And this is Mottek on Money here on 790 KBC. You can also bring up the Mottek on Money podcast on demand at kbc.com or Apple iTunes, all your favorite podcast platforms. I'll be back again tomorrow evening in the 5 o'clock hour. Mottek on Money here on 790 KBC.
It's time for kickoff, and the Believe podcast will get you ready for the new season.
How do you live through this as a Detroit sports fan?
Believe has podcasts covering all 32 professional teams and many of your favorite college teams, too.
You solidified your defense. You got better.
Sideline to sideline, end zone to end zone.
If you don't do those things, then you're not even trying your hardest to win at football, and I don't know what we're doing.
There was a lot of great players on those teams that I was fortunate to be part of.
Search BLEAV podcasts wherever you listen.